Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, August 31st meeting of the Finance Committee. Pursuant to the Governor's June 16th, 2021 Act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Paragraph 20, the Finance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting, please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, a roll call of attendance will be taken. Mr. Whitaker.
Here.
Mr. Alfred.
Present.
Ms. Zemer.
Here.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Mr. Robinson.
Here.
And I'm, of course, here. We are now officially called to order. I think the only thing we have of relevance to cover, we have no administrative issues as far as I know. So the only thing we have to cover tonight is coming up with our version of the policy document to approve and pass along to Travis for further discussion with the select board. So, Dan, do you want to summarize? Do you want to get us started? If you want to, you can actually share the document if you want to, and we can just go through it.
Yeah, one thing, Ken, Dan, the document you sent when I did compare versions with what Travis sent, it said it was the same document, and I looked at them side by side, and I think you sent the same document that Travis sent earlier today.
You didn't get one that said cleaned? Are you sure? Like
it said clean. The one that you emailed, I opened up, and it looked familiar. So then I went to Travis's email and opened up the one from Travis, and then in MS Word used compare versions, and Word said there's no differences.
Well, that's actually Ken's fault because he had sent me.
No, that's not true. I'm looking at it right now. There are differences. The things that I changed are in there different.
Can you show what page? I don't know. I'm telling you.
Under capital outlay policy, third bullet. What does it say?
All right, pump the brakes, pal. I'm just telling you.
No. I opened it up. Make sure you got the right version.
Yeah. So what page, Ken?
Page 3. There should be. First of all, there should be no strike through anywhere in the document. Okay. Because I took all that out because they had put it in the wrong way. They didn't put it in with the right changes, and so I took all that. I just that's why it's called clean, because I cleaned out all that crap.
This is different. Though, Ken, you did take off like the redlining of the 3 to 5% for the capital outlay, so we're gonna have to clear up what some of the changes are.
Yes, that's why I sent you both versions, right? We have what it was,
but I only sent out.
We had a copy that had 17 strike-throughs through it, and I said this makes it really difficult to read, so I just took out all the stuff and said I want to see what it looks like with nothing. But anyway,
so I'm looking at clean. Yeah, go ahead.
If you go to page 3, there should be 3 bullets under capital outlay. And the third one should say the minimum annual capital outlay, some appropriation to the capital expenditure fund, and appropriation to fund capital debt within the levy should be 3% of the omnibus budget. Do you see that? And that's not the same because I edited that today.
In teal.
In teal,
yes.
Yeah, I mean,
That's why I said I know it's different because I literally added that text today.
Jay, they're just very similar. I don't know, because obviously most of the text is going to be the same.
I actually thought the same as well. So it's I don't think that Jay is too.
No, I'm not faulting Jay. I'm more concerned about making sure that we're looking at the same thing.
So, right, I looked at the email that Dan sent today at 1:00, and I have both versions open. Hold on, can I share my screen?
Yeah, go right ahead.
You give him privileges.
Oh, does he have the privilege? Let me see.
Oh, you got him now. I'll set.
Yeah, okay.
That's right. No, that's all good. That definitely, you want to lock that down. All right, 1 minute. Share screen. Okay.
I mean, it may be that you're actually comparing new versions. That's what I'm saying.
So I'm looking at this, which was from Travis, where it says, can everyone see my screen?
No, we're not sharing yet.
Oh, I got to hit share. Yeah. Sorry, I'm used to Teams where you just whack. All right, so of course. All right, see how this says edit staff, select board, 8/24/21. This is the language from Travis's, and this is what.
But that document's not what I sent out. The name of the document that I sent out today.
I know that, Dan. I'm telling you what what Travis said.
So what you're, hold it, Jay, just to be clear. So what you just showed us, the first one, you're saying is what the staff sent out?
This is what in one of Travis's emails, he sent us the Word document.
That's where you're wrong. That's not true at all. I can 100% guarantee that because that teal phrase was not in the document anywhere until I wrote it this afternoon.
Yeah, Jay, I'm looking at the original that he sent out, that he sent last week after we discussed it. And under capital outlay, there are actually 4 bullets, but the top one and the bottom one are crossed off, and then there are 2 in the middle. And there are 2 in the middle, so I'm not sure.
So what I'm saying, Jay, is I think you have 2 of the new version, not 2 of the old version.
Okay. So when I look at Travis's email where it said the Word version, I'm looking at an updated version.
You should go to, hold on a second, Ken. Just if you, Jay, if you go to Travis's email from August 25th at 4:50 p.m.
Right, 25th versus this one, policy Word docs.
Yeah, and pull up that version of the. So close down all the files that you have open, or save it as something else or whatever. But if you bring up the financial policies edit staff _BOS finance committee 8/24/21, that's what I'm looking at now, and that is the different one because it does not have that bullet in teal that Ken put in there.
Right. So this is what I opened.
See, there it is.
See, now hold it. Go back up there for a second, Jay.
Okay.
Right there. See how it's different? That's exactly why I said you got the new version, not the old version. You're comparing the new version to the new version.
But it was named edit staff. All right.
I don't know how you got it named that way or whatever, but I'm just saying that explains why you're seeing no differences.
Okay.
You're comparing the same document.
So Ken, give me share.
Okay. Well, actually, don't say Ken because it's either Justin or Chris is going to do it.
Oh, someone give me share.
I can do it, but they always beat me to it.
Yeah, you got it now.
Yeah.
Okay. And to bring up the right one. All right. You all see that?
Yes.
All right. So basically, we cleaned this up. Or Ken actually cleaned a lot of it up. We kept the 300,000.
Can I ask one question? When we say clean it up, can we identify? Can you call out? Because that's what I was trying to do. Was what was changed from what the select board sent us to what?
Sure. That's what I'm going to go over because basically, and to be clear, it's not what the select board sent us, right? It's what Travis's and the finance team's sort of suggestions were. The select board concurred with most of it, but Ken basically took out all the strike throughs that weren't sort of part of the changes. I think I think we may need to do a little bit more work on sort of annotating exactly what we're suggesting changes. But Ken added this line here that we've now been discussing. Ken, is that all you did?
You added text down there, right?
I did this 3 to 5%.
So going back to that line, can you go back up to Ken's line?
Yeah.
The minimum annual capital outlay. What's the difference? Like, tell me, what do we change compared to?
So a long-term sort of priority of ours, and we share this with Travis, we're on the same page, is that we build the capital set aside in the budget each year up enough that we continue to spend it on capital needs, but that it builds to a point that eventually, say for a DPW facility, right? If you got it up to $3 million a year, right?
Yep.
Could actually say, okay, you know what, we're gonna reduce the capital portion, the amount that's actually going into the capital fund, to $2 million, and we'll take that $1 million and actually use that to serve as debt to pay for a new DPW facility.
Okay.
So it's still capital spending, right? But it's within the levy limit, so we don't actually have to raise taxes for it.
Okay. So the point of that is that right now we've been raising this appropriation every year, and it's been going straight into the capital expenditure fund. We all acknowledge that in the future, when we get it to the right level, it will support both putting money in the capital expenditure fund for current capital expenses and debt financing for certain capital projects. So this just basically says that the sum of those two, the debt, within the levy capital debt, and the appropriation should be 3% of the omnibus budget. That's based on, and just to tell you what that's based on, right? Further down, it says that we put away 1.75 million in FY22. That's 2.8%. We knew that was too little, by the way, but that's a hope, right? But also the recommendation has always been for good financial practices, 3 to 5% of omnibus should go to capital every year. So that's why I just put this in as the minimum should be 3%.
But this actually sort of conflicts with what I said below, because what I said below is I said now we maintain the 3 to 5% for the omnibus, and then we could allocate a minimum 3 to 5% for the omnibus. And at the bottom, though, at no time should the usage for one, meaning the contribution to the capital, fall below 3% of the omnibus.
Right. Well, we can. The reason I wanted to put up there, and again, I'm not saying we can't do it differently, but here's what my concern was. We had prior, if you look at the strike-through version, there was a prior thing that said we would have a minimum allocation of 2%. That was when we were putting less and we couldn't afford, we wanted to raise it up to 3 to 5, but we were building towards that, right? The reason I wanted to keep that bullet there was because what I don't want to, and again, this is my opinion, we're here to discuss it, right? What I don't want to have happen is that we start the next budget cycle and the first thing we hear is, oh, well, now we've got this new formula, we're going to cut the capital appropriation from 1.75 to 1.2, and that frees up $500,000 we can now spend somewhere else, right? Because that would be going way backwards from what we've been working towards and good practice, right? And we've already heard rumblings to that effect of, oh, well, the capital expenditure fund is high enough, right? But nobody's addressing the fact that we have a DPW building, we have these other things. The only reason the capital expenditure fund is high right now is because we haven't, partly because of COVID, tackled some of these significant expenses, and we have things like fire trucks coming up, right? We're just in a period where we're accumulating a little more than we used to because we were spending less during the pandemic. So that's why I said no. I don't. Where's the conflict, Dan, with what you wrote? Because you keep saying a minimum of 3 to 5. I wouldn't say a minimum of 3 to 5. I'd say between 3 and 5% or something like that. Because the minimum should be 3. Then you say between 3 and 5%.
Okay, we can change that to between 3 and 5%.
Because that's because I agreed with what you wrote there. I just wanted to clarify in the bullets, because this is kind of like the plan, but I wanted to put as the policy. The policy is you put at least 3% away every year at the sum of those two.
Okay. And just to be clear, the 3% is achievable because we're already basically there, right? Because we're at
exactly, we're at 2.8. So it just requires a little more than what we had this year, and we're okay. Go ahead, Michelle.
And I just want to say that sometimes it isn't always you're planning for something that you know about. Last year, we had the opportunity to buy the bank next to the library. And that was something unexpected. That wasn't something that, we had planned, and we lost that opportunity. And we probably will never have an opportunity like that again. So we shouldn't always think of, something that we know about and we're planning towards something. We have to be able to move quickly if there's an opportunity that we don't foresee right now and it comes up.
Yeah. Okay, so Dan, you can keep going through the changes or whatever that.
Sure. So
can we go back to the plan? Because it looks like you have the same exact paragraph almost. At least the first sentence. Plan, the town will maintain a goal of budgeting 3% to 5%. And then if you look at the first paragraph, first sentence of the next paragraph, the town will allocate a minimum of, it's redundant.
It is a little redundant, but it goes into them different details, right?
Well, I wouldn't include the first sentence then, because you're saying the same thing up there. So if you want to say something different, why do you want to reiterate what you just said?
Okay, so the town will maintain, so let's see, the town will budget.
Well, I think you put your first sentence there. The town will allocate between 3 to 5% of the omnibus budget during budgeting season. Right?
Yep.
I mean, I think you just put it up there. And then I would just put that, get rid of that part, and, put your paragraph up there and then start a new paragraph and just say the town will also maintain a 5-year capital improvement document updated annually upon, blah, blah, blah. So I'm saying you could get your whole paragraph up there as the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think some of this was Travis adding things.
Oh, sure. Blame Travis. He's not even here.
That's why I'm blaming him.
Just make sure you paste your paragraph again for you.
I guess we don't need that then, right?
Okay. Well, unless you want to add that for the purposes of maintaining whatever, you could put that after your parenthetical pre-free cash use thing, right? Say the town will allocate get rid of the of, right? We'll allocate between 3 and 5%. So change that between.
I get that. I'm bragging.
Right there, right after, yeah, there. Yeah. Okay. But change your between of to between, get rid of the of, and then put 3 and 5%, not 3 to 5%. Yeah.
I hate being the editor.
Okay. For the purpose of maintaining preserving income gifts. And then say this, then you can just put start a new sentence there and say this annual, let's see, this, okay, so hold on, go back to your initial thing. Okay, what I would say is, for the purpose of maintaining, preserving, and replacing cash capital assets, period. Then say, this annual capital set aside consists of, 1, a contribution to the capital expenditure fund, and 2, capacity to long-term debt.
This capital set aside where?
So at the end of the black part, right, the capital assets, that they put a period there and end that sentence. Okay. Then just say this, then say the annual, or this annual set aside, capital set aside or whatever will consist of, and then cut everything up to the 1, and then get rid of the as, right? Say a contribution to the capital expenditure fund to support annual capital needs, and then change the order to an and. Capacity to incur long-term debt within the levy limit to compensate without adding to the tax burden. At no time for usage for 1, drop below 3% of the omnibus budget. Does that sound right to everybody? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Murphy.
Nope. Sounds good. That was it.
I think you had your hand up.
Oh, I did because you went over. Yeah.
Okay.
There's an extra set in there. This annual set capital set aside.
Yes. Good catch there, Mark.
Where?
In the new sentence, this annual get rid of the first set. This annual capital set aside with the system, yeah. Michelle, you're on mute, by the way. Okay, well, you had your hand up. See, you guys. So I'll take it down, but that's why I was checking with you guys because I saw the hands up. Oh, now you just turn your hand up again. Michelle and I just cancel each other out. There we go.
All right, we're moving on.
Okay.
Nope, more hands.
Oh, go ahead, Jay.
Is Michelle all set first?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm back to. I finally found my notes after looking at the version that Travis sent. So there's a paragraph. Let me see here. Yeah, where you're at with the cursor. The town will maintain a 5-year CIP document updated annually. I'm assuming this is our language, not the select board's language.
I believe that actually was part of Travis. We ripped it apart, but I believe it came from Travis.
So this is so red could be in the version that Travis sent, Travis's language.
Yeah, well, it's the finance teams, right? It's the town staff recommended changes.
I mean, to be clear, I think that the 5-year SIP plan is already in like the TA Special Act or something like that. I think that
what I'm asking is that the select board looked at something and said, yeah, we're good. And then we've been working with Travis. So when I look at this and I see the red verbiage, is that
there's
board approved or go ahead?
There's no correlation, and nor should that be an issue, right? We're producing the document we believe it should be, and then we're going to.
Ken, what I'm trying to understand is the select board said like we're good with like the document, and then it's come back to us. So what I'm trying to.
So Jay, I think you're sort of confusing two things. We're not just because the select board has looked at a document and said that we're good with it doesn't mean that like we're not taking their document and saying okay we're making our own document.
Right. It's kind of like a conference committee. We produce the document we want, they approve the document they want, and then we talk about the differences.
Right. So I get that. I'm trying to understand, is this language that the select board has looked at and put in, or is this language that we've put in through Travis or what have you?
I believe this would be something that the select board would.
I was going to say, I think this was in the version the select board approved.
That's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, all right. So where it says updated annually upon select blah, 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 review, like that whole paragraph. So we're looking at this document now, trying to reach alignment, and we're going to look at it, it looks like next year. And what if we don't agree? Like when I read this paragraph, what happens if upon review of the select board in FinCom, use the 5-year CIP document to determine the appropriate allocation of cash? Like, I was just curious when I was looking at that from more like a contract perspective. What if we don't agree?
The second sentence really has nothing to do with the first one, to be honest with you, right? The first one, the maintenance of the 5-year capital improvement plan is part of our bylaws, and the capital subcommittee is part of our bylaws.
So what about on the first sentence? If we don't agree, what happens? Because it's saying like, we're going to look at this every year and we're going to review it every year.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you do anything though, just review it. So you can do reviews all you want till the cows come home.
Yeah. Ultimately, the town determines spending, right? That's the important thing to remember. So regardless of reviews, we make recommendations, the town votes to make appropriations. So the review is obviously to try to make sure that both boards are apprised of where things are going and an agreement on where things should be going. But ultimately, it's just a review, right?
I'm reading that the way Vince just said, which is that it's saying like we will revisit this document yearly and review it. It's not that we, okay. All right. That's clear. Yeah. Then let me see. The next paragraph down, the town will allocate.
I'm just jumping because Jay pointed to it, but the second sentence, it says who's going to use the 5-year CIP document?
Yeah, I was actually looking at that sentence the same way.
It seems like it wants to have a object, like both the finance committee or just the.
There's an English teacher somewhere right in this world right now that's cringing. Yeah.
In the original document, it was stated that the town will blah 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 do a whole bunch of stuff, and I think that's what's missing there. So
yeah, I mean, the funny thing is that with a statement like that, as I said, ultimately the town determines the appropriation, right? So you could say that the town will use, or you could say, even if you said the finance committee will use, right? You
can probably just say they, so it's a plural. It can be all.
Where do you want to do
the board? Instead of, you need to have some sort of.
Yeah, so he's saying instead of just saying use, say they will use the 5-year CIP.
So where you're at with your cursor, go down 2 lines. Yeah. The word use to the left.
Yeah, just start that sentence with they will use. And then lowercase, downcase the U, yeah.
Yeah, it leaves it so you can decide who they are, and we'll work it out. But yeah.
Okay, and by the way, Jay, just to your point earlier, you see that the 1.75 is 2.8. So we're almost at the 3% total anyway. We currently have no debt inside the levy limit, so we're a little bit below, but it doesn't take much to get us to the minimum.
Okay, and then the town where I'm trying to follow, I'm looking at the older version. I see where we've got the word progress, the capital set aside.
Yeah.
I'm with you there. Then if you go.
That's all Travis.
If you go up. No, go back to where we were. Just, I know this is tough. So just stay right there. So when I look at the paragraph in the old version, it was like the town will allocate 3 to 5% during the preseason. Like, yeah, it's like a whole paragraph that. That's
the paragraph Dan moved up. That's the part up there.
Yeah, that's now here. We kind of condensed those paragraphs.
Okay, and my question there was, do these bullets replace if you go up to section 4? Like I was just trying to like tick and tie some of these numbers where that's keep going to the teal section. Exactly. All right. So in that teal section, it says the outlay.
That is consistent with what we have below. The only difference, Jay, between the bullet there and what's below is that the below is the plan. This is the policy. So they wanted to take it out, and I say, I don't want to take it out of the policy. I want to have the policy is that we maintain this 3% minimum. And then the plan is we do 3 to 5% because that's good practice, right? But I want the policy to explicitly say 3% minimum.
Okay, so that's where, like, when we go through the rest of this, fundamentally, I'm looking at, we want to have policies, but I'd rather say, like, I'd rather have levers to deviate, but with explanations and then the ability to recover. So I had looked at this and I put in notes, like, if you're providing targets of 3 to 5%, and if something comes up that we can't do that, it's like you're allowed to deviate from the policy,
which we did and which we've done. Yes.
But the expectation would be then, like, with language saying without a, like, let me see, at no time should usage for section 1 contribution of the CEF to support annual capital needs drop below 3% of the omnibus budget. So where we're trying to say, like, these are the guardrails that we're trying to set, we want to make sure that the town and the town professionals have the ability to, if they have to go outside of that, it's like, what's your plan to recover or come back if you are, like, not putting as much away?
I think that's, so they can come up with a plan, but keep in mind that all the plan will need to be approved by the select board, by the finance committee, and then ultimately town meeting. And then if it's there's an override involved, obviously vote.
But what I'm saying is that we're setting a policy saying, like, okay, these are the guardrails, and when you go out of it, like, the expectation is that you would have a plan to recover.
Yes.
And then imagine, good.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say, Jay, is that's exactly right? Keep in mind, this is a policy document. It's not a bylaw, right?
I understand, but where is that type of phrase to say, like, where this is what our expectations are, things happen, and when things happen and you say we have to go outside of the guardrails, it's like, okay, there's an expectation that there'll be a plan to recover, or at least,
I don't know if you have to put that in a policy, though. I mean,
I was going to say,
because then you're going to try to micromanage everything. Okay. And I'm just thinking of policies I've written. It's like, well, we have exceptions, and the exceptions come, but you don't make you have a reason, and then you document why you have an exception to the policy. But the policy is X, Y, Z.
I'm fine with that.
And to me, that goes without saying, by the way. Just like, to me, when we went to fiscal 21 and we had this issue with COVID, and we said, okay, we're going to temporarily reduce the capital set aside to preserve jobs and so forth, implicit in that was the goal is to get back on policy as soon as possible, right? And we don't know how exactly how we're going to do that, but there was no question when we did that. We weren't sitting here saying, okay, we're just going to take a step backward and just ignore the policy. We're doing this intentionally. We're going below our minimum that we want to have because of an emergent crisis, and we'll monitor the crisis, and as soon as we can, we get back on policy. And that's what we did. So, Michelle.
Okay. All right.
I was just going to reiterate what you said, that when last year, we made it very clear that it was just temporary and it was due to the circumstances. And at the time, we were hoping that there'd be, federal money trickling down to us. We had no idea that there would be, CARES and ARPA. We had hoped that there would be, but we didn't know what form it would be, or what, what constraints there would be, what guidelines would be on spending.
I'm good. All right. I'm going to walk back that request. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's why I said, I think it's important just to remember, it's not a bylaw. These are just guidelines that we have. And if we feel they need violating, we'll move on.
I get it. I write policies at work. I'm not married to it.
But it is important, as Travis brought up, that we try to avoid it, because that's some people will be looking at it, right? And being like, why did you violate it? Unless we have a good reason for it. It will be detrimental to our rate. I mean, it's not like they're going to downgrade us just for a small thing, but over time it could be.
Right. And by the way, that's why I think it's important to have things like that bullet that says this is the minimum, because I think that when you say, well, we don't have a policy that says this is our minimum, but our plan is to have a minimum, to a rating agency, that's like you're leaving yourself wiggle room, right? It's almost like you're purposely not setting a level that says we're going to commit to this level. And you're just kind of saying we're going to try, and they're going to like that. That's the other.
Well, there's two sides to that, right? So the more I'm having the same conversation at work for a different document where, like corrective action, preventative action, when you put in certain terms, now you're held accountable to it, right? And I know you said, well, we can deviate from it, but now as soon as you put it out there, when you deviate from it, like they're checking the box on deviations.
Right. And just to be clear, I think that's important that you are held accountable, because that's my exact point, is if you write the policy weekly that gives you that wiggle room, that's when S&P looks at it and says, you're not holding yourself accountable to the goals you're setting. That's why I think it's important to have it there, for that exact reason. We want it to be, we can violate it, but to Dan's point, when we violate it, we've got to have a good reason to explain to them why we violated it. And COVID was a good reason, and we recovered from that very quickly.
Is 3 to 5%.
But if we just leave it ambiguous, they're going to look at it and say, you're not. Okay. We want to see the commitment in the policy.
I'm with you. So the 3 to 5%, is that a finance committee number? Is that something from industry standard? Is
best
that
practice? Municipal finance best practice.
And Collins Center, which is something a study they did several years ago, the select board, they had a group called the Collins Center out of UMass Boston, and they do municipalities, and they came up, they said you needed to start funding more. You don't have enough going into capital. So we tried to get them to give us, I don't know if they gave us a number. I don't recall a percentage, when we had several people suggesting it, but I don't think they did. But I think.
But they did. They said that if you look across municipalities and also I think Arlington, the guy from Arlington who's done a lot of documentation for finance committees, he's the guy that also said 3 to 5%. Even Kevin Conley, when he was looking at this as a select board member, did his research and came back and said, the numbers he saw were 3 or 5%.
I would think if we're going to put numbers in, it would be good to anchor it to something. And an individual is one thing, but if it's
I can look for it as an exact source, and we can add that.
Yeah,
exactly. I would just say that one reason we had it at 2% in this document, because as of 2 years ago, we just didn't want to force ourselves to try to get there overnight, right?
Yeah.
And so you put it into the policy, and then you have S&P looking, well, you didn't even hit the 3% or whatever, right? Because we're still not at 3%. It shouldn't be too bad to get to it this year, right? Because we're 0.2% away from it. But
right.
we were building to get there.
So that paragraph where that it looks like it was moved up. My thought is, if you're going to put numbers in, at least reference it to something like based on guidance from the Collins Center study, blah, blah, blah. The town will.
Dan can add the reference.
I'll look for the reference and we'll try to.
I don't think we have references anywhere else, do I?
We don't.
So why would we put it here? I think you would put it down at the reference appendages down below.
I was just trying to compromise.
No, I agree. It's just your consistency, though.
But it's just when you're having these targets, it's like, where are they coming from? If we got hard numbers from somewhere, let's somehow reference it.
Well, maybe let me see what I can find, and we can then look at it, and at least we'll have it. And maybe we don't put it into the document. We know that we can show you the foundation.
Yeah, if someone says, "How'd you come up with these numbers?" we could say from this group, right? Regardless of who looks at the document.
Okay.
And yeah, Vin, I haven't combed the document to reference everything, but that was just one thing where I'm looking at. There's a lot of rewriting, and we're talking about setting aside allocate 3 to 5% of the omnibus budget. It kind of jumped out at me as, where are we coming up with these targets? And if there's if we hired somebody, or if there's an established entity that said this is best practice is thrown around a lot. But if we can anchor it to a specific study, then I think that would probably, I don't know, that would resonate with me more, at least. All right. I'm good. Thank you. That was my questions on page 3, or at least that section.
Okay. Hold on a second. Let's see. Okay. Debt service. I don't think we changed the debt service. Ken, did you do anything here?
No.
Okay.
Are you on? Hold on. Going back to page.
You jumped over free cash.
I did?
Yeah, you blew past free cash.
Well, we don't. Okay, it's my bad. I didn't change anything. Okay. I liked, Travis's changes of putting in the 18% of unassigned fund balance. I don't have any concerns there. No one emailed me with any concerns about this. But if there are changes, certainly let's talk about it.
And so we're going to update, like, for instance, progress. We're going to update this yearly because it references in fiscal year 2020.
Biannually. So every 2 years when we do the review, I would imagine we would update the document.
Okay.
Yeah, we reviewed every 2 years. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Clear.
Okay. So debt service, again, I think that we didn't make any changes, and I think we're changes from what Travis's changes were to the prior document. So I think we're good there. Hearing none.
Yes.
So for Water Enterprise Fund, I had, and then I offered to retract my one idea, which was to put in that water rates would not be reduced until the water infrastructure fee is eliminated. I did put it in here for two reasons. One, I wanted to discuss it. But then I also looked above, and it says that the plan was to continue to use the water meter fee to plan for cyclical replacement of meters in town, and it just seemed like there were other areas in here which sort of create, were dictating sort of in some ways policy for the select board too. But I did sort of say ideally, I kind of used softer language. Look, this is one that I believe in, but it's not one that I'm not a hill that I'm going to die on. But I did just sort of.
Well, the question is, do you realistically think the water rates will be reduced?
They were 2 years ago. Or a year ago.
I know, but I don't.
Well, I was shocked that they did it then. I just, that was so. Realistically, do I think they would be reduced? No, but they have been in the recent past, and so I see no reason why it couldn't happen again. I guess.
The other way of phrasing this is not to say water rates should not be reduced. Is to say water rates should reflect the current and anticipated amortized future costs of running the thing, okay. Something like that. Vin, the accountant, can come up with the phrase. But
sure.
In other words, because one of the things that I was going to mention was, one thing we're going to be discussing in the ARPA steering committee is the list of capital stuff. And number one on that list is green sand filter replacement at the water treatment plants, right? And my comment to Travis when I saw that was if we are in a position where we've got to lay out $600,000 to replace the filters, that should have been reflected in our rates when those filters were installed, right?
Well, that's what we.
I don't know what the right phrasing is, but you see what I'm saying, right? If you say that, hey, the rate should reflect current operating costs.
I wouldn't say amortization or depreciation because those are not cash. So I would say something to the effect.
That's why I said future.
Well,
but it's not cash.
Capital, but future capital needs replacement of infrastructure.
That's fine. But I mean, I guess Ben, we understand when you say we should reflect amortization or depreciate. I mean, of depreciate. I actually meant of depreciating infrastructure. I know it's technical, but my I know, but my point was here that you have to fully load the cost, if you will, right?
I know, but I don't think that's what we want to say.
Right.
Yes, totally agree, but it should say reflect the future anticipated replacement costs, including replacement of the infrastructure, not amortization and depreciation. Because once you've paid it, who cares? I mean, from a cash standpoint.
Well, you know what I'm trying to say here. Right?
I totally know, but I think they.
Well, that covers it. Ben suggested terms cover it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mark, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with this actually, and the reason why.
Well, hold on a second. This is a momentous occasion, I think. Mark.
I'm disagreeing.
Go ahead, Mark.
So I know I'm generally an agreeable guy, but in this particular case, I don't know that there's. I wouldn't necessarily have a problem if they said, okay, jack up the fees to $100 a house, and then reduce water rates, so that it would affect, globally the town in a different way than say just a water rate increase might affect.
Well, first of all, with this updated phrasing, the two are not connected anymore, right?
Okay.
To Dan's point was, hey, if you have an infrastructure fee, you shouldn't be lowering the rates. My point was the way, instead of tying those two directly together, is you say the rates should reflect the current operating costs plus, and again, I know I'm using the wrong phrasing, but it should capture the current portion of, I mean, again, I don't know what the right accounting term to use is in the phrase, but you've got these filters, for example, as I said, they have a 15-year lifetime. The rate should reflect that you got to collect that money so that 15 years from now you're ready to buy the filter.
And I think by saying what we have in anticipated costs, including replacement of the infrastructure, would include that. So you should have a sinking fund, is what you're trying to get at. But
except you don't use sinking when you're talking about water.
The infrastructure fee was a necessary evil. That's not a great way of actually doing this, because what should have happened is 20 years ago they should have started raising the rates,
yes,
cover the fee, and then you would have had the higher tier users paying their sort of, if you would, for usage fee. The problem is by the time they were trying to fix it, had you jacked up the rates to where they needed to be to sort of cover the infrastructure, that you would have had tier 4 people paying just insane amounts that would have just, they probably would have gone and dug a well, and there you would have actually had detrimental revenue from it, because you would have, in essence, low water usage payers are actually paying for high water usage users usage. So we'd like to try to get ahead of that so that we don't have to sort of in the future,
Yeah.
Just go ahead, Mark.
Does the infrastructure fee that everybody pays, does that hit everybody in town or just?
No, only water users.
Okay, then it's a moot argument what I'm trying to make anyway, so forget it.
So people like Michelle.
Well, no, but most water users, even with wells, don't they also have a lot of them have town connections as backups, or is that just for electricity?
Well, some might, but not all do. Most don't.
Okay.
But as I said, just to be clear, right? The situation we're in now is the result of decades of rates not being set correctly, right? Yeah. So the fee was basically I wouldn't say a necessary evil, but I mean one way of addressing long-term. I mean, look, when I first moved to town, the first thing that somebody told me here was the water is the best bargain in town, because literally my first water bills were like $20, right? When they should have been 40, that kind of thing. And so now they're 300 because for 30 years they were $20 for most of the town. Right. And that's no pun intended, that's water under the bridge. So my point is that with regards to the water rates is that they should reflect these costs, and if they do, they won't go down. You won't really have a basis on which to cut them, is my point.
Right. One other thing I'd like to just bring up is, as the finance committee, it is not our job or responsibility to dictate policy to the select board or to any other policy setting boards in town and sort of the operating policy. I do think that our financial policies, it is our responsibility to sort of help guide the town financially. So if the select board wanted to make a decision that we thought was financially imprudent and that they had full power over, I mean, that is their right, but that does not mean that we shouldn't, have, at least recommend policies that are differ from that.
We should be telling them we don't think this financially that's the right thing to do. That's
right. Because there are things in town that statutorily the select board and the school committee and other sort of operating policy setting boards have control over that the town doesn't. For instance, fees, right? The school committee can charge many fees that do not have to pass town meeting. The select board can do the same, and that's how the system is designed and works. But that also does not mean that that doesn't impact the finances of the town.
Right. Our job is to make the right recommendations, right? So we're in essence recommending to them what we think the best financial practices are. So, okay. So is everybody good with this new phrasing for the water? Okay, move on, Dan.
Okay. All right. Okay, so the OPEB, this is where we're getting, I didn't change anything here.
But the 2033 thing, though, right?
No, right. I didn't change anything until the plan. Now, the one question I have is that the policies, this was the policy before this year, is that the fully fund the OPEB obligation not later than 2040. So that's been our policy.
Right.
It has not been our sort of the finance committee sort of intended outcome, which is the plan. But I'm wondering if we don't change the policy. I didn't put that in there.
Right.
But
to give you the background there, the reason it originally said 2040 was because that was a benchmark set by the state. Right.
it was a 30-year basically plan from when we started the.
No. I'm saying that 2040 number was the state's. The state always picks nice round numbers and says, they pick something far out in the future and says, okay, everybody should be funded by this, just like talk about climate change. Oh, half carbon by 2030, quarter carbon by 2050. That 2040 date was originally back in the early 2000s and to like 2000, was put out by the state as, oh, we've got these big time bombs sitting out there. So everybody, hey, 2040 looks way out there. So everybody should have it funded by that. That's where that number came from. It had nothing specifically tied to our funding. That's why. Now, I'm not saying we can't change it, but I'm saying that 2040, I just want to make it clear that wasn't that we sat back originally and said, we're okay with funding OPEB by 2040. We just said the state has set this target. So our policy should reflect that target.
Okay, so we'll keep that.
And of course, that when we get closer, we're going to change the target to 2050.
We're going to keep this 2040 because it's sort of coming from the state, but it's when the plan that we get to the 2033.
Right. When we started the funding, the plan was 2033. So, and again, that 2033 was partially chosen because of the 2040 deadline that the state had put out. So.
I'm trying to understand when you say we were planning the 2033, where
when we first put in place a schedule that we were following for the 1.5 million a year, the terminus date was 2033, and that's when we've been sort of telling people that we plan to be fully funded by.
That's what town meeting was told.
Right. So just to explain for anybody at home or for Jay, if you don't, I'm sure you get this, Jay, but just to clarify for everybody, right? OPEB is to pay for benefits that are accrued today. It's putting money aside to pay for the benefits that our current employees have already accrued. Okay. We have a liability for that. And if we don't account for it, then when those employees retire and we have their costs, we're putting the fund, the purpose of the fund is to cover those costs when the payments become due. The way you can fund it is you have an every 2 years by, in our case, law, because we have our special legislation, but even 32B of state law says this too. You have every 2 years, you have to do a valuation of your liability. And to Travis's point, that liability moves all over the place. But as part of that valuation, they kind of say, what do we think your liability is right now at this point in time? How much do we think you have to put away to get it fully funded? And if you use a 30-year amortization to get there, what is the payment that's required to get there? And the reason I want to point out that out is because that's very key, because that's the equivalent of somebody saying to you, you take out a 30-year fixed rate mortgage today, and then every 2 years, you look at what your mortgage payment would be if you had to refinance again for 30 years. But that's not what you want to do, right? You want to pay it off in the first 30, right? Because as you pay the principal down, every time you look at it 2 years and say, well, if I refinance for 30 years to balance, that number is going to go down. And that's why there's this confusion about, hey, we look at the OPEB report and it says you can put away less. Well, it says you can put away less because they're talking about essentially refinancing the remaining liability to another 30 years. When we put this together, right, this was not a finance committee only thing. This was with the current select board and with the town administrator at that time, right? We had this 1.5 million. We went to the actuaries and said, if we have this 1.5 million, how do we get from here to where we need to be? And they produced a funding schedule. It said, you'll get there by 2033. We looked at that and said, okay, that's the commitment we're going to make. We went to the town and said, here's what we're going to do. We've got this $1.5 million that we realized in savings elsewhere. We're going to put this, this was never in the operating budget. We're just going to put it towards this liability and we're going to just pay it down. And so that's the point that Dan and I have been making, that the commitment was made to the town that we were going to do this by 2033. Now, having said that, every 2 years, the valuation changes. The liability goes up sometimes, the liability goes down. We have investment returns. We have more employees. If you actually look at our liability from 2018 to 2017 to 2019 or 2018 to 2020, I don't forget which 2 years it is. the last two valuations, our liability actually went up, even though we've put this $1.5 million towards it because we had many more new employees and things like that. And that was Travis's point of, hey, the number changes, but that's why it's even more important in my mind to stay on the 2033 because it is moving all over. We know it's going to change, and we know there are assumptions and they change all the time. But we did go to the town, and I none of us may be there in 2033 to do this, but I think that we made a commitment to the town to do this funding this way, and we should try to maintain that. Go ahead, Jay.
So you're saying in 2003 at town meeting, we said 30 years from now we'll...
No. In 2000, it was probably 2013 was when the legislation was signed. It was probably 2011 or 2010 when we started talking about this. It was 2008 when we started working on this.
Yeah,
okay? 2008 was when we started working on it.
So the 2010 plus the 30 years is what gets you to the 2040.
When we had the $1.5 million, we said, if we take this $1.5 million and we stick it in this fund, how long does it take for us to get where we need to be? And is it before 2040? And they said, yes, it's 2033. And then they said, and so it was around that time. I can't remember whether it was 2033, 2034, 2032. It was somewhere around that, right? And that was the target we went back to the town with and said, look, if we do this and we take this $1.5 million and we stick it in this fund like we're supposed to, we will get to this point in 2033. And along the way, there have been actuarial, one thing that I'm actually worried about is, or not worried about, life expectancies change, right? That affects the liability, things like this. Because remember, these are benefits being paid till somebody dies. So when people live less, you pay less. When people live longer, you end up paying longer.
It went down this year.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. We actually might have a better valuation after COVID. But
so that's why I wrote it. Travis seemed to, and I was trying to find sort of a compromise here to show that we're not intractably just on this 1.5 forever and ever and ever. Is that as long as we can maintain the 2033 funding schedule, we could look at reducing the contribution from 1.5 if the actuarial table for that shows it, as long as, and then I added that if actuarial table changes in the future and it goes back up, that we then shift it back.
Yeah. And that was my point, right? What Travis, where I took issue with the original language was it was extending that date out 7 years, which by doing that creates a situation where the 1.5 million is more than needed, just so you can then put this into the pension. Now, in the end, it goes to the same fund, right? Both are invested in the same entity, right? It's just how you divide it. But I look at it and I say, this is one of those examples of when you went to the town and said, this is what it says, we should stick to it unless there's a good reason to, right? It's one thing if the assumptions change and you say, hey, guess what? We doubled the number of employees in town, and so this liability is going to take years, right? That's something the town would be aware of when we're hiring all these people, right? The issue is I don't like changing the goalposts just for the sake of being able to divert money, partly because I truly believe that our free cash, and I'm not saying we're going to have millions every year. Free cash varies a lot, maybe very low, but it's almost consistently higher than about 400,000 or 500,000 a year. So I sit there and say, there is capacity there to put funding into the pension to bolster more than just the credits, so to speak, into the pension fund. And I prefer to do that, stay on the 2033 until we, and to Dan's point, if the data shows that we don't need one and a half to get to 2033, then divert that. I'm fine with that. But I think the 2033 date is important because that's what the town was presented with. Go ahead, Jay. Is it up from before? You have a new question?
Yeah, no, I should have lowered it, but so we said, even though the recommendation from the actuarials was to go in 2010, the actuarial said your target is you got to hit it by 2040. You're saying we, being the finance committee and the select board,
and the
went
town.
to the town.
And the town.
Right. At town meeting, yeah. Said the target is really 2033.
No, okay, I mean, I think you got to flip around the way you're looking at it, right? It's not like somebody came to us and said, this is how you get there by 2040. What happened was we had the $1.5 million from a savings of a negotiation we had taken, and what it was basically savings from a health insurance renegotiation. Okay, the changes to health insurance that the state allowed us to make. Okay. when they allowed us to make those changes, partly because that liability, but partly because that savings came from health insurance, and OPEB is predominantly health insurance for retirees, just to be clear, right? That's the primary expense in OPEB, okay? The decision was made that since that was health insurance savings, it should be dedicated to dealing with this health insurance for retirees, as I said, OPEB, but primarily health insurance for this liability, okay? So we went to the actuary and said, if we take this $1.5 million and we stick it away every year if we stick it away every year, because I'll tell you right now, the funding schedules that they typically recommend are not fixed payment. They vary every year and they accelerate, so they get higher and higher.
We didn't want volatility.
We didn't want that because that would require money to be taken from the operating budget, available money every year. Yep. By having this $1.5 million out of the budget to begin with, nobody got hurt by it, and we were addressing the liability. We then went to the actuary and said, if we stick $1.5 million in this every year, because we have this savings, what does that get us? And they came back and said, you'll be fully funded by 2033. So we went to the town and said, if we take this healthcare savings and we stick it into OPEB, try this OPEB trust fund we're wanting to create, we will get there by 2033, because that's what the actuaries told us.
And one thing I can say is that I get Travis's point of wanting to try to mirror the dates. Ideally, you would sort of have an end date, a fully funded date, consistent for both of these things. But I think Michelle is absolutely right that one of the things that we've been talking about with this money, because, again, there are groups in town that would love for us to cut the OPEB funding, is that this benefits the schools and the teachers tremendously. Given that about 2/3 of it are of the plan participants are teachers. And so if we take money from this fund to fund the town side pension plan, we're essentially reducing that sort of contribution, which benefits those teachers, and just putting it into the hands of the town employees. So supplementing from free cash, as you said, and as we talked about, seems like a great sort of way to do it on at least until we're fully funded in OPEB, or if we're overfunding, if we can maintain the 2033 fully fund date with reduced contributions in the future.
I don't think we're taking away, like, the schedule that Travis put together has us there in 2037.
Well, you're delaying. You're delaying it. You're taking money out of the funding from the benefit of
you're taking money away from something that benefits all employees and putting it towards something that only benefits a subset of employees. That's the issue. That's the other issue.
Because you're saying that we won't be able to cover our OPEB liability if we don't fund it by.
No. The pension liability, the OPEB liability covers every town employee. Yep. The pension liability only covers non-teacher employees. So OPEB is important to every employee. Yep. Pension is only important to a subset of employees. And so that's not a big issue, but it is significant in the sense that the OPEB liability, as you said, affects way more people than the pension fund liability does.
Right. So I'm looking at basically what your balance is. What I don't see is what's the drawdown. Are you saying that if we switch to Travis's schedule and go down to 1.25, that there will be people in town that won't have their basically healthcare life insurance covered by the town?
It means we won't be fully funded for 4 or 5 more years, which breaks our commitment to the town that we made when we started this thing. And also,
I'm trying to take it in 2 bites. The way Dan was talking was he said we are taking something away, and that's
no. We will not be. No one will be going without the benefits that they've been promised. If we do this,
we can't do that anyway, even if we wanted to.
It would just take longer to get there. And one of the reasons we said we're not going to take money out of the OPEB trust is that because we believe that this benefits all employees. And so now if we're all of a sudden going to do it, so we take it away from what benefits all employees to just what benefits some employees, it will look like we're reneging on our commitment.
I think that's the bigger thing. I don't think we're taking anything away. Go ahead.
It's
Michelle.
a moral obligation. We've been promising all along. Every time the school committee says something about the OPEB, we say, this benefits your employees. That's what we've always said. This benefits your employees.
So
I think it goes back to like the conversation we had about policies, where if we're going to break a policy, we need to explain why. I think that if there's a good explanation of why the schedule would go out another 4 years, I think a reasonable person would understand it. If we weren't talking 4 years and we were talking 40, like I just wonder, based on, and I wish, Travis deserves time off, but I'm guessing there's a reason why, and he had stated in the last call of why he wanted to move some of these monies to the pension, and we're talking about pushing out OPEB being fully funded by 4 years. I definitely resonates with me that when you went to town meeting in 2010 and said we're going to have our OPEB commitment nailed down by 2033, that resonates with me. But the other thing is, like, okay, what's the opportunity cost of staying at the 1.5 on OPEB, taking 250 out of free cash and putting it to pension? Like, it's not free. So when I look at this in my very simplistic way, I'm like, okay, we definitely need to explain to the town why in 2010 we had one plan and 2021 we have another.
And there's no opportunity cost because the money is actually going to be invested exactly the same.
Well, the 250 that we would that Ken, I thought, said in the last meeting that we would take from free cash to put to the pension means that 250 that you can't use for capital. Right.
Right. Well, okay. So let me.
So that would be the opportunity cost of holding the 1.5, putting the 250 in a pension it's 250 less for capital spend.
Let me explain why I said that. Okay. We have had favorable free cash for several years. Okay. When we first started having free cash, when we pulled it out of the budget and made some other changes so that free cash was a little more substantial.
Yeah.
Our number one thing was our capital set aside is insufficient. We were spending more in capital than we were putting aside in that appropriation every year. So we said, okay, we're going to take the free cash, whatever we have, we're going to do two things with it. We're going to put it towards stabilization to get to our target, our goal, and we're going to take the rest of it and put it in capital because we know we need a lot more money for capital. We're not putting enough away. Okay. After doing that for several years, of course, we've gotten to where we need to be on stabilization. So now we're at what I call the top off stage, where on a year-to-year basis, all we need to do is put a small amount in stabilization to keep the percentage constant, okay? And we've also gotten the capital expenditure fund up to a decent level as well, okay? So now, when we look at that free cash, be it 500,000, $1 million, $2 million, if you look at those the three buckets, because now there's a pension fund bucket, right? Mm-hmm. You look at those three buckets, topping off stabilization takes very little money. If we continue to increase the set aside by a tiny bit, we get to that 3% where we don't necessarily need any free cash money for capital anymore, right? Then all the rest can go into pension. And that traditionally, that number, based on what we've been running for, if you look at, say, let's just pick round numbers. Say we have to put 100,000 in stabilization every year from free cash. We have to put 100,000 in capital for whatever reason to top it off, right? With a level, even with 500 in free cash, that would leave 300 to go in the pension. So if Travis's goal is to get 250 a year into pension, what I'm saying is we can keep the 1.5 million and get the 250 into the pension. We don't have to be trading off the 250 from the 1.5 million. And that's what I would prefer to do, is say, we'll do it this way. And because this whole discussion becomes moot if we have $1 million in free cash for the next 5 years, while we're still putting away the 1.5 million, because we'll be putting away 800,000 a year into the pension fund, which blows away everything he wants to put away here. And that to me is the way to do it. We have these buckets. We filled the first two. Now we just keep them topped off, and now we can divert the predominance of free cash into the pension fund.
The capital budget, the capital bucket that you said is topped off is based on what?
We're at like 10%. We're meeting our policy for what we should have in capital. Now that may change, right? If we have debt, things like that, but the whole point being that this that if the concern is we should put $250 a year into the pension fund, I'm saying it's not guaranteed because free cash is all over the place, but based on the way we've put our financial structure in place, we should have the ability to put some money towards that pension fund every year.
You're saying as long as you look at the 10% capital bucket and assuming that 10% holds true, that like we're not going to invest more in the town's infrastructure, you're saying that bucket's topped off. But
well, no. Topped off is a relative term. We have a policy that says we want to have a certain amount in that fund, right? Yeah. If a new high school comes up, right, that's not paid for from the capital expenditure fund. That's paid for from a debt exclusion, right? That's a totally I'm not trying to imply that somehow we suddenly have enough money for capital. We have enough money to support capital within the levy if we get the annual appropriation up to 3% or something, and we can revisit that on a yearly basis because that's just our minimum, right? And we can still, I'm telling you that based on the numbers we've been seeing, if the goal is to put $250,000 into the pension fund every year, we can do that right now without touching the OPEB money. And I prefer to do that than touch the OPEB money. And when I say we can do it, it's not because we have buckets of cash sitting around, it's because the way we've been using free cash, the two other sources that have been using the predominance of free cash are now at a level where they don't need to be funded at the level they've been funded in the past. So you free up money there for other non-recurring things like the pension fund, other non-operating expenses. It's not operating money I'm talking about here. I'm saying we're talking about non-operating money.
Yep.
We will have in that pool enough money to fund that $250,000. So I'd rather put a plan in that says we keep the funding at 1.5. We use free cash. If, to Dan's point, if OPEB can drop below 1.5 because we're still on target for 2033 with less, then divert that and put even more in, right? Maybe we get to the point where we're putting $500 or $600,000 into the pension fund. I'd be fine with that. But I do not think we should. I'm just saying there's no need to extend that date beyond 2033, and you could make Travis's objective without doing that. So I prefer not to do that.
I would think.
I mean, I don't know what everybody else thinks, but I think that's.
I'm on board with this. I mean, this is, I think that we have a fairly substantial amount in our capital fund as it is. I mean, to the point where we should probably start looking for some larger projects to use it for on. And I don't foresee $250,000 at all being something where, and keep in mind, if something like the lights came across where we ended up, having a large free cash number and we wanted to just use it and pay off the lights, I don't think that, we couldn't explain that type of thing to S&P and said, we recognize that we weren't putting the $250,000 away this year, and we've all agreed that we're going to make sure that we double it next year to $500,000 to make up for it or something like that. I don't think that doing 1 year to reduce the debt and the tax burden on the residents we don't have, what I'm saying? We still have flexibility in this kind of thing as long as it doesn't become pattern and practice.
I guess what I'd want to understand is, like, from Travis and the town treasurer, like, why they proposed the schedule that they proposed. Because everything you said sounds reasonable, but I think Travis is a reasonable and pretty professional.
With due respect, I mean, their opinion is an important one to take into consideration, but our role as the finance committee, and it's the financial oversight for this town, is to have our own independent view. And, we heard from him and why he wants to do what he wants to do. He wants to marry up the 37-year funding schedule. And I think that I don't know if he has other plans for free cash or not, but his main goal was to marry that up, and he thought that because it was essentially the same money going into the same pot, it shouldn't be an issue. But I think that the difference that we're coming at from this is to some degree sort of, because we've been telling town meeting something, and it's as much of a sort of what promises were made by elected officials to the town, and which is more than sort of than Travis has been involved in the past.
Why didn't we talk about that in the last meeting, though? Like,
we did. I don't know. I mean, I didn't we? Did I just make that up? I'm pretty sure we.
Yeah, but just, Jay, to clarify one thing, I don't think that Travis's concern, which we all share, is we want to show that we're making progress towards our other remaining liability, which is the pension liability, right? Travis's objective was, here's a plan for how we get 250,000 or so a year into the pension fund. What I'm saying is, so he's basically moving the buckets around. What I'm saying is we don't have to do that. There's a better way to get to that objective that does what he wants, which is get 250,000 into the pension fund. That will make everybody happy, that will get the money there. That does not involve taking it from OPEB. And I'm saying if that option exists, we should be doing that. That's the crux, because then we live up to the promise we made to the town and we meet what Travis would like to see happen. So, I mean, it's just a better way of getting to where he wants to get at. And in fact, it's better in the sense that if you do get to the point, as I said, I would bet you that you get there faster by doing it this way, because when you get to the point where you're closer to that 2033 date, and you maybe start shifting money over, then you can put in way more than 250. And as I said, at the end of the day, all the money's being invested in the same place. So it's not like you're missing on returns or anything like that. It's all going to the same PRIT. So it's just which bucket you put it in. And I'd prefer to keep moving on the bucket we promised on and start filling the other bucket, because we can do both. And again, we can only do both because it's one-time monies we're putting in there.
And we're doing both, right? Because we're doing both without impacting the operating budget.
Yes.
And because the level of free cash to support what we're doing is such that we should always be generating that amount of free cash. It's not as if we're trying to monkey around with the numbers to sort of budget low so that we generate free cash.
Yeah. So the pension's a well-known number, right? I think that's one thing. Whereas OPEB is like you guys said, we're guessing what healthcare costs are going to look like
right.
in 2033.
But CJ, my argument to that would be that's exactly the reason why you don't touch it, right? Because if it was, if we had 100% certainty on the number, and then we sat here today and said, hey, we can look at our investment returns and say they're great, and so we can change the number and know we're going to make it, right? Then but as I said, I'll show you our last valuation where our liability went up in spite of our $1.5 million funding, right? Yeah. And that's because those assumptions changed. And yes, it is, to Travis. Travis is correct. It's an estimate as to what you're going to have to pay in the future. So it's moving. Yeah. But to me, that's even more reason why you just stay on plan.
The pension is too, because it's based off of an estimate of mortality. So people, who knows what's going to happen? Maybe we find a cure for cancer. So that blows that whole mortality table out of the water. Everybody's going to be living to 100 and something. So you're looking at a lot of different assumptions.
Well, it depends on what the solution to is been, right? Cancer drugs could be like $1 million therapy.
Oh, that's different.
Yeah, but we're never going to be paying that. That's why you have insurance, right? So it's
going to be coming out of OPEB. So that's why we need to keep funding it.
And Ken, we're in a plan that insures, no? Or at least
no. But we have catastrophic insurance, right? So we don't.
Yeah.
High expense.
It will jack rate. It will jack rates though.
It'll jack rates, but I'm just saying that above. I think we have. Again, I don't want to speak to it without perfect knowledge above it, but what I'm saying is we're covered against catastrophic expenses.
Sure, but it'll yeah. Okay. Anyway, moving on.
Yes, let's move on.
All right.
Sorry, Michelle. Go ahead.
I just don't understand the argument of OPEB being an unknown as a reason why you can lower it. To me, that would be a reason.
I think that's what Ken just said.
Right. I mean, our insurance is going from $1,000 to $3,000 deductible, and the rates are probably going to go up. So.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Moving on. I didn't touch anything else. I wasn't entirely sure we needed the OPEB and the aggregate benchmark stuff, but I didn't touch anything else. But I mean, the one thing we could do is, contribute at least 1.5 million annually to the OPEB and pension liabilities. I mean, we're kind of covered that above. Our plan still covers that. It's just that it's all, at least the first 1.5 is going to go into OPEB, unless the schedule shows otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, all this aggregate benchmark says is that we're going to maintain at least $1.5 million total between the two. So I mean, I'm fine with that only because I think we're going to do more than that. So, Michelle?
We haven't touched on it at all, but do we want to make any kind of Do you have any kind of discussion about marijuana money, about cannabis money at all?
I don't think
Well-
we can. Because I think it's all up in the air now because they're,
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
from what Travis had said last time, it was, they're going to have to renegotiate and who knows what the revenues. And so, it's a big, huge hole in projecting at this point. I don't think we really should.
Not only that, but we
Historical.
don't do that with any other local receipts right now anyway. And so I think we can have much larger conversations before we started. I actually am a proponent of actually finding a source for marijuana revenue once we have a better idea and we can project it better.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think from a policy perspective, yeah, it's way too, because the other thing is, remember that there are still rules that say like some has to go into a general fund and things like this, and that changing may change all of it, right? If the state changes the direction. So I wouldn't propose putting something in now, maybe in our next review 2 years from now or something, when we have some idea as to what the revenue is going to be and so forth. But I'm with Dan on this, right? To the extent that it's not recurring, like if when they sit there and say, okay, we're going to make payments for 5 years, then yeah, we got to be careful. We don't want to do anything. Certainly doesn't go into operating, but we want to be careful with the planning for it because it's going to drop off. But when we get to the next phase, which is the percentage of revenue, which is what Vin was referring to, right? That's what we don't know yet. And when we get to that point, that to me just becomes a local receipt and you just estimate it every year because it's recurring revenue, right? I mean, it's no different than, some of the things excise tax, right? We get that every year.
well, I do think that once we sort of have a better handle of it or can try to get a better handle of it, I do think with two streams of money, I do think that there's an argument to be made to try to find a specific use for it, and that would be the marijuana money and the solar. I just think because they're as long as they're predictable, they're long term. They're not the problem with the solar money is I believe it's a 20 or so year
25 year, yeah.
25 year. So not that that's not long term, but at the same time, there would come a day where there'd be a cliff. But
okay, so where do we proceed from here? Go ahead, Michelle.
I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a cliff happening, not necessarily how to spend it, but how to make sure there wasn't going to be a cliff.
Well, at the moment there won't be because it's not being used for anything other than free cash for the most part. So that just Jay.
Yeah, well, yeah, and with the whole like cannabis thing, like the fact that it's not legal at the federal level, yeah, I wouldn't look at that as a steady revenue source for a while, right?
Yep.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just trying to get my head around. So this document that has black and red text in it, this has been around for a few years, correct?
Been around for many years, yes.
Many years.
Created in like 2011 or something like that.
Okay, so in 2011, the OPEB section only had a date that referenced 2040, correct? Like I'm trying to piece
no.
a couple things together. I want to make sure I have my facts.
I don't want to say that yet because I don't know that for sure. So you're going to make me go look. Let me see. I'd have to find the original.
If it's on the site, I'll do some homework. But
what are you trying to figure out, Jay?
Yeah, just walk with me here. So we're inserting language that's talking about dates of 2033, right? But this has been a document that's been around for a while that I'm guessing had a date of 2040.
No.
The 2033 date has been around since the beginning of the discussion.
If you look at the actuarial schedules, they were all using 2033. Now there's additional, if we change it based off of a million or 1.25, it changes the estimated, but 2033 is out there for several of the ones that are.
But
actually,
did this policy have, that's what I'm trying to understand, like the policy, I'm with you that there's schedules out there, but the policy.
So actuarially, they need to provide a 30-year funding schedule every 2 years when you do it.
Right.
But
that's what I was talking about earlier.
And so what we said is no. So you can provide that for us. That's great. We'll put that in the records. We tick that box. But what is we want to maintain that the 2033 funding schedule or $1.5 million, and it's always kind of just been at that 2033 level.
It's always been, meaning there's always been a schedule, but has it been referenced in this policy document prior to this round of conversation? Or has the policy document been a little bit more high level where it only references the actuarial schedule? That's what I'm trying to understand.
I don't recall off the top of my head. We was an understanding between the select board and all involved in the OPEB trust committee that we were maintaining our 1.5 and the 2033 funding.
But it wasn't, I'm guessing it wasn't in the policy, and now we're injecting in the policy, the schedule. Go ahead.
I don't remember what exactly was in the policy document. Ken might have that.
The 2019 one that Travis sent out just says the 2040, no later than, or not later than. That's what the...
Right. I don't know if the document ever, I'd have to go back and see the errors. I don't think it represents.
Like we went to town meeting in 2011 saying by 2033.
Whatever it was, yes.
Yeah, by roughly, just rough numbers, but by 2033, OPEB will be fully funded. But it looks like we've had a policy that never like caught up to the town meeting. We've only had a policy that referenced an actuarial schedule that says 2040. So I think that's like, because I'm trying to reconcile 3 dates: 2033, 2037, which is the schedule Travis put together, and 2040. I don't have anything else in front of me, but you know, and I'm thinking
nothing ever reconciled 2037. We never heard that before.
No, the 2037 is just his. If we take this money and divert it, we get to both at 2037.
To make it match
it's
up.
a counter proposal to whatever schedule is out there
Yeah.
of 2033.
Right.
Keep in mind,
That's one reason why I say you don't need to make a match.
Keep in mind, per the governance committee prior to Travis joining for the 5 years before, the finance committee was running the town. And so sort of, you know, what we said went.
Yep. Okay, so that's the past, but I'm just trying to understand, like, we're going to meet with the
sarcasm.
I get it. We're going to meet with the select board, and we're going to, it looks like I'm inferring from conversations that the select board was on board with the schedule that Travis has, which is 2037, right? Not 2033. I'm looking at a Word document that historically has only date has had it in it as 2040, and our board is saying 2033.
Well, Jay, I would challenge though that the select board agreed with the document that he proposed, but I don't think that anyone they ever said I don't know if it was ever discussed, and it didn't sound like there was much discussion around the document in its entirety, nor the differences for sort of what we did now, or no one ever said we didn't want to do a 2033, right? So they agreed with the document, but I'm not sure they didn't agree with. You see, there's a difference between.
I guess here's what I'm getting at is I think when we meet with the select board, I think it would be helpful if we laid out that there's a policy document that references an actuarial table of 2040, which is just like Ken was saying, like they just as a rule of thumb, they use 30 years out. We recognize that they put together a table that says 2037, which is 3 years faster than the actuarials. But I think it would be helpful to reference like which town meeting we set the edict of 2033, and we explain that in this meeting and this part of the meeting, and it'd be helpful to even have the clip, I'm sure they're recorded, this is where the promise was made to the town that we're going to commit to fully funding OPEB by 2033.
It wasn't an edict, first of all. It was a promise.
Okay, promise, edict, pick your word. Like,
well,
let's show evidence that
words matter, and an edict makes it sound like the finance committee is dictating, you know, what should be done. It was more the commitment to the town and why we were doing what we were doing to take the 1.5 from the healthcare savings.
It was a promise, like you said, from the finance committee and the select board, or who made the promise?
It was a joint promise by the select board and the finance committee. We were in agreement.
Okay. So that's what I think helps us. Like, it's a chasm, right? 2033 and 2040.
This isn't a trial. This isn't a trial. If we talk to the select board, they're going to believe us. If we say this is what we told town meeting, we're not going to have to present evidence.
Yeah, I don't think I was inferring a trial. I just think that it's helpful to say, like, this is where I'm coming from with the 2033 number, and to be able to say, like, this is exactly where we said it. I don't think that's a trial. I think that's just a normal conversation when you're trying to reach an agreement on a document that both committees need to align on, most likely by the end of the year, with the absolute target of February.
Well, there's going to be some debate. We're going to have some back and forth. I mean,
it's just a suggestion. It'd be good to say, hey, and remember, as you recall in this meeting, we made a promise to the town.
Well, but none of the current members of the select board were in town, were on either the finance committee or the select board at the time of this.
Completely understand, but to be able to say like this is when our predecessors put that promise to the town, I think that's helpful as a reminder when we're reviewing that document, and being able to at least like I mentioned earlier, where I'm like, okay, let's reference the Collins Center study, where we're saying like we came up with 3 to 5%. We didn't just make it up. It wasn't just something that you thought about on the way to work. You know, it came from a study with this 2033 date, which is sooner than the 2037 schedule that the select board was asking for. I think it would be helpful to say,
the select board, I mean, Ben can correct this. The select board was not asking for a 2037 schedule. This was Travis and the finance team's proposal,
which I would assume the select board would be on board with, since Travis was pushing that forward.
Well, I mean,
I don't think he was going rogue on it. So that's all I'm getting at.
So all I'm saying, are you saying that Travis only does what the select board asks him to do?
No, I'm assuming that Travis would be on the same page with the select board when he's putting together schedules and proposing things of this magnitude, and also liaisoning to the finance committee about it.
I would have no knowledge of whether the select board was conversing with Travis about the schedules he was proposing before he proposed them to the select board.
Yeah, I would never suppose what the three of select board have in mind unless they took a vote. I would never, ever assume anything unless there was a vote. I mean, there was a vote on the document, but they haven't seen what we've proposed. So.
Okay, right. I'm looking at the schedule that he emailed us in addition to the document. So I did not ask him, like, in court, like, did they vote on the spreadsheet and did they vote on the Word document? So I might have stretched on that, but I'm going to take a leap of faith that a supporting schedule that reconciles to the document that the select board looked at and said we're pencils down on, that Travis and his team didn't do in a vacuum. And so when we meet with the select board and the document says 2040, Travis has a schedule of 2037 and we're saying 2033, all I was trying to get to is, I think it's helpful to say, like, this is where we're coming from to get to the 2033 date. Because you're saying, like, we're upholding a commitment that our predecessors made to the town. And this is when we made it. Here's when it was memorialized.
I really don't think you're characterizing the relationship between the select board to the town administrator for something like this in the way that it's being done is
okay, but either way, we're saying 2033 and the document says 2040. So, like, take Travis out of the commitment, because you're getting wrapped up in something that you don't need to be wrapped up in. We're saying 2033. I heard Ken loud and clear say that our predecessors made a commitment to the town in somewhere in 2010 or 2011 that we would basically have OPEB funded by 2033. Like, where is that?
And continually through the last 10 years.
Right.
But it doesn't look like it was in this Word document. At least 2 years ago, the only date said 2040 in the policy. Well, I'm not saying nothing else happened, but we have a policy document that says 2040.
You know, the policy document says by 2040. So nothing that was said to the town and committed to the town was contradicted by this policy. So it's not like there was any.
Okay, but we have a policy document that only says by 2040, and now we're going to inject language that says by 2033. I think it's just helpful to say that when we're adding this language, here's where we're coming from.
Well, we're only changing language that was added to the document too. So we're like, I would have, like, I guess Travis added 2037, and so we took it from more of an understanding amongst the select board and the finance committee and the town administrator on the 2033 goal, and we're now memorializing it. And Travis's initial recommendation was to memorialize it at 2037, which is different than the 2033. So we're simply saying we our recommendation is to memorialize it at the 2033, which is what we've been saying all along.
Well, it's not a recommendation. What you're saying is there was a promise made to the town on this date.
No, our recommendation for the document.
Right. In the policy, which only references an actuarial schedule at 100,000 feet. We're saying if we're going to make the policy a little bit more precise, you're saying let's reference the date that we promised to the town that OPEB would be fully funded. And you're saying that's 2033. And I'm saying it would probably be helpful to say, here was the meeting where we promised to our predecessors promised.
I agree with Jay, because this is going to be probably a discussion, and the more fodder we have, and I know that Michelle says it won't be a trial, but it will be a discussion. It probably will be a little heated on this. And I think if we say this is what we promised back then, and we have the tape, roll out the tape, it says then, and that.
Yeah, there's like there's got to be something. It's like, here's an artifact where way back when we said this is a commitment we made. It would be helpful to have that somewhere to say, like, look, this isn't our idea. This was a promise made 11 years ago.
Even referencing something Ken has said in his past and his, So
what I would suggest is let's cast this aside for now, because I have the documents. I will find the documents. Okay. I know I have the original schedule somewhere in my pile of FinCom documents. I will find it, and I will show you the page that shows the funding. And if it's not 2033, we can go from there. But I'm going
to take a leap of faith that it is 2033, Ken. Like, I'm already there that you're going to have a schedule that says 2033. What I'm saying is,
I will produce that.
Right. I know you will, and I'm good with that. Like, we'll see another schedule that says 2033. What I want to get to is where in what forum was there a commitment to the town? Like, that to me is like, okay, that anchors the 2033 conversation versus just saying, remember, we talked about it. Like, something as important as this, I got to think is memorialized somewhere.
Okay, it is memorialized. In May of 2011, I gave a talk where I talked all about this liability. Okay, so I actually talked about it at like 3 or 4 consecutive town meetings before we established the trust. But I know I had a big discussion on it because I'm looking at my presentation from 20. But this was not actually the discussion, but this was a discussion about this liability back in 2011, because that was when a certain someone had put a bunch of petitioner articles on to try to illegally change our pension and benefit system. Yeah. And there were other articles I had to talk about the whole benefit liability because someone was concerned about it. So I did a whole thing then. Then at subsequent town meetings, I talked about establishment of the trust fund and things like that. But it all goes
But that is a presentation by the finance committee. You had mentioned earlier that this was something that was agreed upon. Because I'm with you, Ken. I sit through the town meetings and you give the presentation. I remember in the blue background you walk through. Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely there that you may have presented that. But what I'm trying to understand is, like, you're saying that the select board and the finance committee in partnership presented at town meeting that we would, so like that's what I'm getting at, not just your walk through the State of the Union of Finance.
When we did this, the finance committee, the town administrator, and the select board were all in agreement with that funding schedule. It was recommended to us by the then town administrator with the support of the select board. That has never been questioned. It was never a controversial thing. There was never a disagreement between the three entities. We were all in agreement that this was $1.5 million was going to be the money that was going to be put to this until the liability was funded. And as I said, I'll pull out the schedule, and I have the original schedule that says exactly which year, whether it was 33, 34, 32, whatever, but I have it. I have to go get it.
I'm good. I know you'll send me the schedule, and I'm sure that there were conversations, but where did we promise to the town? That's what I'm asking, because then we could say that there was a promise to the town made by these two boards. The same two boards now, fast forward 11 years later, that are trying to align on a policy that's referencing that date that was discussed in that meeting. Like that's
Yes.
all
Well,
I'm
I
getting
have to
at.
do some more research, but trust me, that 1.5 million has been discussed, and that deadline of 2033 has been discussed. So
And
I'll go back
aligned
and try
upon,
to
not
find-
just discussed, but aligned upon. Like this document has been discussed.
Well, okay,
But
just to
not
be
aligned
clear,
upon.
until about 2 years ago, every single thing I said at town meeting and all those presentations
Yeah.
was in alignment with the select board. Okay, we didn't have any issues with controversy, and when there were, if there were any, they were always duly noted. So you don't need to separate what I said in 2011, 12, 2013 with what the select board felt, because they were in agreement all those years with everything I was presenting.
And you can ask the members from the, Jay Leary.
That's right. Ask Mr. Marsden.
Would they have
ask
voted
Jay
on
Leary.
it? Would they have voted on that, Ken, you think, if they discussed it? Would they have voted on
No,
it?
because it's not the purview of the select board. Okay, it's the 1.5 million is the town voting to appropriate. They were on board with us going to the town and making a recommendation that we spend the money this way. The town
Voted on
administrator was
supporting- voted on
recommending
sup-
that I go to the town and recommend that the finance committee recommend that.
Voted on supporting the number. Like, I know that the town votes on the number, Ken. I'm saying like,
The select board, as a matter of course, has no role in determining budgetary policy for anything outside of the departments they oversee. Okay?
Yep.
So when the town establishes an OPEB trust and something like that, it is the town, and the town administrator obviously is a part of that and makes, has his opinion, and the select board has their opinion. But there is no formal need for the select board to vote on matters like that.
so
they
when
don't.
you were saying earlier that the finance committee and select board hand in hand made this promise to the town, you're saying the select board's alignment.
Through the town
was-
administrator.
their alignment was inferred through the town administrator.
It wasn't inferred. The town administrator reports to the select board. The town administrator was recommending to us and advising the select board, because again, they have no direct role, right? Was advising the select board of his recommendation that this is the way we address this problem. And
Okay.
the finance committee said, we're on board with that. And the select board said nothing because they had no objection to it.
Okay.
The town administrator said, let's move forward with this, and we did.
Got it.
That's why I said, I think
Was that
that's an
Paul?
important distinction.
That was Paul
That's an
LeBeau,
important
or was that?
distinction because
Yeah.
because the select board has limited influence over budgets they don't control for a reason, right? For a reason.
Yeah,
That's the
Ken,
balance of
I'm
that.
just trying to keep up with what you told me and,
Yeah.
and just piece it together. So I wasn't getting into who does what. Was it Paul or Jeff? I can't remember who was the
It
town.
was Paul. This was. Are
Okay.
you kidding? Jeff had nothing to do with this. The policy was in place long before Jeff. But
Got it.
Jay, the only reason I'm pointing this out is because you keep saying, "Did the select board vote? Did the select board vote?" And what I'm telling you is that's not their role in a matter like this.
No, I just asked you once. And the reason why I asked is that I've seen some on committees where in terms of saying like, hey, this is our position, they will take a formal vote, even if the position is to inform versus someone, a committee that has the ability to actually control what is being voted on. So I'm asking you, when I asked you, did they vote? I know that at a town meeting, the town approves items on the warrant. What I was saying is if there was alignment from the select board, did they at least vote on their position? And it sounds like the answer is no, because it was more a communication through the town administrator back to the
It could
the
have.
finance committee.
If somebody wants to go through the notes.
well, Paul lives, I think he still lives the next street over, so I could always just go knock on his door
Yes.
and he could probably fill in the blanks for me. So, all right.
Yeah. Okay.
That's clear. Thank you.
So do we have ground horse meat now?
I think.
Okay. I think we're there. Okay. So the question is, how do we proceed? Is everybody's fine with the language we have now? Do you want to do another discussion? Do you want Dan to send out a final draft and we take a vote next Tuesday? Or is everybody ready to vote on what we presented today?
I'd like to see the finished document and then vote on
Okay.
a frozen like
Dan?
PDF.
Hey, change all the text to black, and get rid of all the highlighting and everything like that. Send out a final version and we'll vote next Tuesday.
Okay.
Okay. And if you find anything, typos, everybody looks at it and finds typos, anything, then send them to Dan and he'll deal with that.
So in the select board meeting, I think it was last night I think it was last night. It's all a blur. They were asking that obviously we send the document along and then as a committee meet with the select board. And I'm assuming we would be walking through our feedback on the document.
Yeah, so first, I mean, the first thing we need to do is vote on a document for what we recommend and give it to them, give them the opportunity to look at it, and we'll talk to them. And
I got you. I'm assuming like I think we beat this up. That's why I'm kind of jumping ahead that we'll have a clean version. We'll vote on it and then it'll be sent back to the select board. Like I'm assuming just like you said, you're going to send the schedule. There is a schedule. Like I'm like mentally like, yeah, I'm already there. So what I'm sharing is like I'm assuming I'm going to take a leap of faith that we're going to align on this document the next time we meet and vote in favor of it. And then the select board is saying, there we go, there's Ben, that we will, that we've been asked to meet with, the finance committee has been asked to meet in person with the select board to go through this document and provide our thoughts on our feedback. Did I get that right, Ben? Who's on mute?
yes, he is nodding in agreement, right? And I will just tell you, right, there's a process for this that I know Ben and all the select board members know, which is, Ben as the liaison could reach out to me anytime he wants and say, we want you to come in and talk about this. So that's all I'm saying is that I'm not worried about that in the least, right? We've got to get the document voted first, and then we'll go from there and have whatever discussions they want to have about it.
Well, the chair of the select board last night on record asked that we attend. So that's why I'm saying like Ben
And
can
that's
also
good.
share that.
That's good. But
Yep.
just to be clear, the reason I'm saying this is because this is why Ben's here, right? He's the
Yep.
communication link to us, and it's good that was said. But and I'm glad you're delivering that message. But I'm saying that that's what Ben and the chair, right? I routinely, for prior boards, talk to the chair every week, and I
Cool.
talk to Tina anytime she wants to. I mean, we've had trouble hooking up lately because of vacations and stuff, but I'm not worried about that piece of it, right?
Other than
Everybody
vacation,
knows how to find me when they want to get on
other
the
than
phone.
vacation, Ken, you guys talk. Just curious about
What?
that. Other than the vacation, what can be a challenge in the summer, you're saying you and Tina talk weekly too?
We don't talk weekly yet. She
Okay.
just became chair before vacation season, right? But prior select board chairs depends. Like sometimes I don't talk to them at all, that often. Sometimes I talk, like Mr. Marsden and Mr. Leary, for example. I talk to them weekly. Mr. Aronian, same thing, pretty much weekly.
Yeah.
Right? They would call me. They'd have their meeting Monday. We'd have our meeting Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, I'd get a phone call or I'd call them and we'd chat about anything that needed to be discussed. So I'm not worried about that in the least. As I said, the select board knows how to get in touch with me, and we know how to get in touch with them. So,
But as a committee, if the request was us to meet, are we going to meet in like both teams, full roster?
what will happen is I will discuss it with the chair, and then we'll
Okay.
decide how we proceed.
So
Okay.
are there any changes to be made, or is it just to clean it up?
Well, we made changes, right? We made some changes.
Right, but because I'm trying, if we can vote today, then we can meet with the select board next week. If not,
Well, they're not meeting next week.
We're not
they're
meeting next
because
week.
of Labor Day.
We're not meeting next
Oh,
week
okay.
either.
because then when are the Jewish holidays?
We're not meeting next week because Tuesday is Rosh Hashanah.
Right.
Right. There you go. I was just going to say, the two members who were my advisors on that know they have to let me know when we can't meet.
There's no school on Tuesday because of Rosh Hashanah. So
Okay, so that's why I said clean it up, meaning get all the red and all that crap out, send it around. We'll vote at our next meeting, and then we'll go from there,
Okay.
and we'll wrap it up. And of course, Travis will be back by then, so we can have,
Okay. If anyone else has any other comments, let me know about, not now. Please.
Okay.
Is anyone keeping track of the select board? I mean, of the Board of Health? Do they know how, do they vote anything?
I don't know, but we can't discuss it. It's not on our agenda.
It's very, very convoluted. So.
Well, I am the liaison, so you guys can tell me.
Okay. No, I don't know. I haven't been
I missed
tracking it.
it.
I've been, but it's some strongly worded advisory or something. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the only thing on our agenda. So if we're done with this discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second? Okay, it's not subject to discussion. We'll proceed immediately to vote. Mr. Alfred,
Aye.
Ms. Zemer,
Bye.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson,
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker,
Aye.
and I vote yes. That concludes the Tuesday, August 31st meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us tonight. As you heard, we will not be meeting next week, but we will more than likely be resuming our regular Tuesday schedule the following Tuesday. But for tonight, we're done. So thank you and good night.